Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea, creative wellness practitioner.
And I'm Sarah, and I'm a professional art therapist.
Okay, well, we've got a little bit of feedback, so let's nip that in the bud right now. So, welcome to our creative community. So, if you haven't been here before, essentially this is a space where we make art together. We can chat. We'd love to hear from you if you're here and you want to say hi. Please do. We can see the chat, and other people can see you in the chat as well. So we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, what to expect is that we are just doing that, making art together, hanging out. It's not therapy, but we are trained art therapists. We do not offer therapy. If you need that, there's details below on how you can find that for yourself. So today what we're going to do is a little bit of a mindfulness practice, a little bit something different from our previous sessions. A little mindfulness practice, a check-in, and then we will get into the art making. We'll do some chit-chatting in that space, maybe a little bit less today since one of us has a little bit of a rocky Wi-Fi connection. Sarah specifically. There may be some sort of delays and a little bit of lag, and so please bear with us as that is happening. And if Sarah does drop out, she may or may not be able to rejoin us. So just please, bear with us as we're working through this all. So there may be some chit chat. It might be a little bit of a quieter session today for that matter. But that's okay. In the last 10 minutes, we'll just explore our art a little bit and do a little bit of a recheck-in and see how everybody's doing at that point, and we'll wrap up. So we've got an hour ahead of us, and so if you are here and you want to say hi, please do in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to participate in a mindfulness practice, I'll go ahead and get started with that. Sarah, did I miss anything before we get into that mindfulness practice?
Yeah. No, I don't think so.
Got everything? Okay. So we will just dive into a little bit of a mindfulness practice. I keep saying it's a small one. It really is. We're just going to do a couple of minutes of just mindful breathing. So that can look like a few things, really, whichever feels best for you, or an alternative. If you already have a practice or you know what you like to do, then I encourage you to do that. This whole session in this space is always a place where we encourage you to do what feels best for you. So a couple of options. One of them is box breathing. So you can breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, and then hold at the bottom for 4 counts. And just repeat that. We'll just do a couple minutes of it. So you'll do a few rounds. The other option is to just belly breathe. So just breathing deep, make sure you get into your diaphragm there. You can put your hands on your belly like Sarah's doing there, just to feel in, and make sure you feel the belly just expand on your inhale. And then when you exhale, you can do that however feels best. I love to do a sigh. And this kind of goes into the third option for maybe the littles in the crowd who want to join us, the dragon breathing, which can be just a little bit of a next level belly breathing. So breathe in through your belly, and then you can pretend you're breathing fire out. So a nice big breathy sigh. So if that feels good for you, even if you're not a little, I like to do that. That's my favorite way to do it. So it just feels really good and sort of cleansing. So I'll just get you to whatever breath work you're planning to do, whatever feels best for you. Just make sure you're sitting upright. Get your feet planted on the ground or cross your legs or whatever feels better for you. Just make sure you're comfortable in your seated position. And we'll just do this for a couple minutes. And also on your own time, in your own pace, whatever feels better for you. So we can start with an inhale and you just go as you please, as feels best for you. You don't need to keep up. You don't need to follow our breath. Okay. So we'll just breathe in through the belly and out. Into the belly. And out. In through the belly. And out. In through the belly. And out. And if we just want to do 2 more of those wherever you're at. Into the belly. And out. And one last one. Into the belly. And out. Getting a little bit of a crackling sound on my end, so I'm not sure if anybody else was able to hear that, but it sounded like an invitation to end the practice anyway. So yeah, just kind of tuning into how you feel now as you've done a little bit of breathing. It doesn't take a lot, I find, just to get kind of back into your body and get kind of settled in the space. And I think that's the beauty of mindfulness, is just getting us into a state of being present. So maybe you notice that now you're feeling a little bit more grounded and more aware of how you're feeling, and maybe not. Sometimes it takes a little bit more than that. But either way, that's okay. Just be aware and notice how you're feeling, and try to approach it with a sense of non-judgment. We are who we are, and we feel how we feel every given moment, and that's okay. So what we're going to do to check in today is a movement. It's a little bit different again than what we have been doing, but now that we're a little more in our bodies with the breath, I figured it's a fun way to sort of tune into more of how we're feeling. So a movement can look like anything. It can be a very small movement, like maybe you snap your fingers, or there we go. Maybe you snap your fingers, or maybe you just want to hold your hand to your heart, and that's okay. Maybe you want to get up and you want to dance. Maybe that's how you're feeling today or in this moment right now. All of it is welcome. And just to kind of give a little bit of a heads up, sometimes that feels a little bit awkward. I know I am not a person who really expresses myself with my body a lot. So it does feel a little bit out of my comfort zone to check in with movement. But I think it's a really good practice to get into, just to feel into how our body is feeling in a way that is as safe as possible for us. So I will invite Sarah and I to check in with a movement. If anybody else wants to check in and just say what movement they're doing, what feels best for them, you can write that in the chat. And otherwise, Sarah and I will check in with a movement. Yeah, so maybe I'm going to take a minute to think about my movement. And Sarah, whenever you're ready, or whichever of us is ready, we can check in when we feel up for it.
Yeah, I think I just did mine.
Yeah.
Just slid my hands along my table and just sat back into my chair. Just sitting back into the support of the chair. Felt like the same. Yeah. Maybe I'll keep reminding myself to do that. Sitting back in support.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I think my shoulders are feeling tight, so I want to do something like this. Just a little stretch, almost like a sun salutation, just to get my shoulders open a little bit. Because that feels really good for my body right now. And good to prep us for a little bit of art making, which I always end up punching over a little too much for the practice. So I am more open now, and ready to dive in. So today we're using art as a resource. And I mean, arguably, we're always doing that in this space, but we're going to talk specifically today about how art can be a resource to you and how creative expression and the art making process in general can be supportive to you. And this is a theme we're carrying over the next couple of weeks and maybe even longer, depending on how these couple of weeks go and how much more we have to say about it. But yeah, it's really just about tuning into what you need in the moment. And that's why mindfulness works really nicely with art as a resource. So you might want to consider while you're getting your art space set up, what it is that you need today. What exactly would feel supportive to you? And maybe you want to consider your movement if you did one and what that looked like. Do you need space? Do you need to work in a bigger container, or do you like something small? Does that feel safer and more comfortable for you today? What sort of materials do you want? Sometimes when I'm in a space of just needing grounding, I don't want to clean up a mess. So I want to work with dry materials or as few materials as possible. A sketchbook and a pencil is sometimes just what I need to make art my resource. And think about your environment too. Set it up however feels more comfortable for you. Think about what you're wearing. Think about how you're sitting. If you have distractions like a phone, maybe you want to shut your phone off for this hour and just give yourself some space to create. Yeah. And I think that's most everything I wanted to say. Sarah, is there anything that you want to add to that before we get going?
I think we'll probably touch on it a little bit later, but I guess I would just say be open to whatever plans you may have for your art making, to them changing. So just because you start with, say, like right now I have pencils and I have watercolor out, it doesn't mean I have to finish with watercolor, or I'll later change into something else. So just tune into what comes up, I guess, while you're making art. So like, and yeah, I'll get into it with an example later, but maybe you grab watercolors, but then you're like, actually, I don't want to do that. You full permission to do something else. So
Yeah. It's a great point, Sarah. Thank you for coming back to that, because I think that's one of the greatest freedoms we have with art making, is the choice to just decide that this isn't actually the thing I want to do. And that might be the case where you start with something like felting is more often than not a really comforting practice for me. But some days I just don't feel like I want to do it. And even when I start doing it, it's just like, maybe this isn't the thing that I need right now. Maybe I need watercolor, or maybe I need clay or something else. So it's really just a case of, following that. Yeah. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable in the art making process, but if it's really just not working for you, you don't have to force it either. You get to decide.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to turn on a little bit of music for us. If anybody out there wants to let us know what they're working on, or what your go-to art making practices for resourcing, I'd love to hear about that. Hi. Nope. Looks like we lost our connection there. Yeah, we're all back.
All right.
Yeah, a little a little rearranged, but that's okay. What the heck?
Yeah, I know, all of a sudden, I thought, okay, it's going to work out.
I wonder if it's the music. Maybe it's going to be a real quiet day today. Yeah, maybe I'll just avoid the music. Seems like both times I turned it on, we got booted, so that's not happening. Sorry, guys. It's going to be a quiet session today. It's just really an invitation to turn on some of your own music at home if you like. Again, going with that environmental piece that we touched on before, it's just setting up your space however you like. And if that is silence for you, that's great. If you prefer to have music on, please do. Listen to whatever you like. And you don't have to worry about ours infiltrating your sound space today. Can you hear all my poking?
I can. It's the art making sounds, which I like.
I love it. That's honestly maybe my favorite part of doing felting is that sound.
Mm.
It's very satisfying for me.
So I was thinking about maybe not any sort of in-depth definition, but maybe a little bit. Hello, Nora. Nora.
Hi, Nora. Nice to have you.
Maybe we can just chat a little bit more about what do we mean when we say art for resourcing. So for me, when I think of a resource, I think of it's a way to support me. And so for me, in my discovery of art as a resource, that looks different. Could look different at different times in the day. It could look different at different times of the year, the week, how I'm feeling. So I could give my own example. When things feel like they're out of my reach or there's a lot of unknown happening, and maybe I don't have a lot of control, which happens in life. There's lots of things we don't get control of. I may do something like crocheting because it's just repetitive and I know what I'm doing. It's contained in that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then another day that might be flip flopped, where it's like, oh, okay, I've been really on a schedule a lot. I feel like I've been doing a lot of stuff lately, and everything's been too contained. Then I might go into something like using a watercolor because there's less control. So it's kind of like the way I see art as resourcing. One of the ways I see art as resourcing is how can we tune into what our needs are and then try and mimic it or satisfy that need through our art making process.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense. So, yeah. Like, maybe you're frustrated, so maybe you might get some Play-Doh out and really try and like work that problem out, or, that frustration out. That's another kind of classic Sarah example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it really beautifully there, Sarah. Just like understanding what you need. And sometimes we can't really verbalize that. We can't really identify it. And that's the beauty of being able to just sort of follow what feels good for you, or what is drawing your attention when it comes to materials and size of the space that you're working in and things like that. Just following that, because when it comes down to it, your body knows what you need, whether you can consciously recognize it and verbalize it in that moment too. So when you're saying that, there's moments where you need something that you have more control over and you feel really confident and comfortable doing it, you may be naturally drawn to that thing in your process, and you may not consciously be aware of it, but it's
like a practice, right? Like, I mean, for us, training in this work, we have made art more times than I could even begin to count. And the more you make art, the more you start to recognize patterns, I believe. Oh, I chose this material again. I chose this again, and I felt this way. And you start to make those connections.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. Like sometimes we just don't know. We don't know what we need. But there is some insight into what we need based on what we're choosing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It really is a practice, just as the mindfulness is a practice. And the combination of those things will really help you the more you do them in that way, to sort of just trust and go with what is calling to you, right? Go with that. If for some reason you feel called to use blue, but you don't like blue at all, it's your least favorite color, give it a try and see how it feels, because it could just be that thing that you need, right? And it's that simple when it comes down to material selection and color selection, textures, things like that, right?
Yeah. Kind of like right now, I didn't have a plan of what I was going to make, but my earphone cord happens to be laying on my art making space. And so I'm kind of just tracing with it. I don't really know why. There's no in-depth meaning. And sometimes we don't need meaning right away or even at all.
Yeah.
But it just feels satisfying to use it as the cord as like to trace.
I love that. I love those little surprises.
Yeah.
Actually, something similar happened to me today, or the other day. I haven't worked on it yet, but got this beautiful little splotch on a Post-it note because my tea bag just jumped right out of my mug. I don't know. A mind of its own. Jumped right out of my mug and onto my Post-it, and I thought, that's pretty cool. I'm going to work with that at some point. I'm going to make that into something. So,
yeah,
happy little accidents.
It kind of ties into last week's too, around like found objects. I think they're kind of intertwined there.
Totally. I'm feeling inspired today by an artist called Yayoi Kusama, because she is known for her works of repetition, the polka dots in particular, and how she would utilize them in many different forms in paintings, in drawings, in sculpture, soft sculpture being one of those things. And I'm kind of taking that in my own way by making little polka dots in a felted pattern, because I think that repetition it's actually tied into that idea of a practice, right? Just getting into a flow with things. And we talk about flow a lot here. but I like the idea of repetition as a mindfulness practice, and just as a way to sort of let go of any expectations about what the process needs to be or what the outcome needs to look like. Kind of like you're doing there, Sarah, just sort of improvising. Like, these polka dots can be all different sizes, they can be all different colors. I seem to be exclusively using the yellow for now, but I may switch at some point and I may not. I just am really enjoying making all of these little dots and kind of curious about what the pattern is going to be like.
Yeah.
Letting my mind just drift away with that.
And I think the big realization for me in that process of letting go in my art, without having to know the outcome or have a really like solid plan, was that the majority of the artwork that I made, that I fell in love with, I had no concept of, well, this is what it's going to be at the end. And those pieces were the ones that I tended to love the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those, especially the ones where you get kind of partway through and you're like, what am I even doing with this? What is going on here? And that's where this kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier, that sense of discomfort where you're like, I don't really like this, but I feel compelled to keep doing it because it's not making me stressed out to do it. It just feels uncomfortable because I don't understand it in this moment, that kind of thing. And then they end up being, some of our favorites. All at once, they just turn into something really cool. So maybe now, on that note, is a good time to check in with how your art making is going. How are you feeling about it? Are you feeling a little bit uncomfortable because you're not sure what's going on? Is it causing you stress to keep doing the thing that you're doing? Do you want to make a change? How are you feeling in your body? And if you want to talk about what you're doing, you're going to share a little bit, please do.
Here's an instance of me being like, I'm not really sure what's going on. I'm doing a whole bunch of hearts, and I don't really know why. I don't tend to draw a lot of hearts, but I'm just going to roll with it.
Yeah. It's a perfect example.
Yeah. But there's that here's where the resourcing comes in the sense I don't know why I'm drawing them, and that's okay, but it's also very relaxing to just repeatedly make the same couple of marks over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about the repetition. And even just like, I'm glad you mentioned the shape, Sarah, because sometimes that's something that will come up if you are paying attention in your art practice or reflecting back on your art practice over some time. You might notice that there is a repetition of certain shapes or colors, and those shapes and colors or textures or styles might just be indicative of something that is a resource for you, or something that you go to at certain times when you need certain things. We often, I think the spiral is probably one of the most common ones. I know it's been a theme for myself, and I don't want to speak for Sarah, but but I think it's one of those shared themes that is really, really common in art making, that just feels really good. And sometimes that's all you want to do. Just draw a few little spirals, continue with that shape. It feels really nice sometimes.
When you were talking about that, I thought about one of the symbols that showed up for me, show up for me, not past tense. It has been past tense too, but is the bowl. And so now I'm going back into my art and making little bowls around all those hearts.
A bowl feels good.
Yeah.
Nice little comfy container.
Yeah. Behind it. Maybe before I forget, maybe I'll show the piece of art I was talking about. So when I was talking about when you start a piece of art, you don't have to necessarily finish it, or things change. And so this is just a page from a coloring book that I pulled out. I think I was coloring with my kids. And you can kind of see, where's my camera? It's choppy, but there's a part in the corner where I've started to fill it in with pencil crayon. And it's quite fine detailed. And I was just getting irritated, like I didn't want to stay in the lines, and I was just felt too hard at the moment of using pencil crayons to stay around all the little pieces. So I flipped it over and decided to make my own snow globe. And maybe I should put it down so it's not choppy. And I just doodled my own thing, and that just felt so much better than trying to trying to stay inside the lines. So I just created my own doodles and my own snow globe, rather than staying in that frustration for too long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Takes a bit of awareness, I think, to be at that point. And yeah, we need to just go easy with ourselves, right? Because it can be frustrating for any number of reasons. And knowing when we've done enough is kind of it's a tricky balance some days.
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance. I'm loving the texture of this as I'm going over it. These little little baubles. I don't know what to call them, but they feel really nice. I guess I should have put out a warning. I know there's a whole thing about, is it tryptophobia or something? There's like a bunch of little spots or divots in something. It makes people very uncomfortable. I never thought about that as far as this practice until I was making it. I don't know if that's going to bother people, but
I've not heard of that.
mm-hmm. It's a big deal on social media for a while. I think it is. I can't recall what it's actually called. I might be saying it wrong. Mm. Mm. Anybody out there who's just joining us is wondering why it's a little quieter today. Our music seems to be kicking us out of the video, so it's just a more silent session today. So feel free to turn on your own music, do whatever you like with that. It's your time and your space.
Maybe I'll also show a couple of other pieces around resourcing. So this is just kind of giving a few different ideas around art making. So this is a piece where we just put on music and just made marks. There's really no definitive symbols here. It was just listening to some music and going along to the melodies, to the different sounds. And I switched up the materials. Just had a few different materials in front of me before I started. So that's another way that you can use the art. So these were 3 different songs. So this has a few distinguishable symbols like circles and some things. And then this is another piece. And I do remember, actually, I think I used these wax blocks and I just kind of let the wax blocks, that's a mouthful, wax block. How do you say multiple blocks? Blocks?
Fluxes?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, anyway.
Sounds right.
Yeah. So I used them and just kind of played around with them and let them dance on the page to the music without, again, making any definitive symbols, or I didn't have a big plan about what the image was going to be beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone is watching the replay and you have other ideas around what you would do for resourcing art, we'd love for you to add it in the comments to build like a little library of ideas for people.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't even shown any of mine yet. I'm just so immersed right now. But actually, talking about hearts, Sarah, I could have brought this up then. I brought one of my little Zentangles that I do. Sometimes hearts are a common theme for me, actually, which I find surprising some days. But I love just the fine pen work. This would have been a time when I was really just needing a clean way to make art, something that didn't require a lot of materials and a lot of cleanup, a lot of setup. Because I find I have to be in the right space to be making art that requires those sort of things, like clay. I love it. You mentioned clay at one point. Clay is one of my favorite materials for either meditating or letting out some of that frustration that you talked about earlier, Sarah. It's one or the other, but regardless, I need to be in a space where cleanup isn't going to add to the frustration, right? I think that's a big part of it for me is the process of setting up and taking down. Because sometimes using art as a resource means that it's easeful, right? The process is just easy from start to finish, to some degree anyway.
Yeah. Maybe I'll jump in there and remind about next week. You reminded me next week we're going to explore, not next week, the next time we gather, in 2 weeks from now, we're going to explore natural materials as a resource in art making. So we would invite you to collect some art materials throughout the week if you'd like.
Yeah.
And those could be anything that you could find in nature. And I would also add, let's be mindful of how much we're taking and where we're taking from, not to take in abundance, and try and always focus on materials that are already dropped on the ground and that there's an abundance of them, I guess.
Yeah. And just taking that to the next level, I always like to just express my gratitude for the materials that I find as well. You know, just being grateful for the offerings that we get. A fallen branch or dried leaves. Just being grateful for those things as you find them. There's so many beautiful things that we can work with. Really looking forward to the next session already for that. It'll be really fun. And hopefully there's enough snow melted where everyone is that they'll be able to do some harvesting of materials outside.
It's not like you're gonna not be able to participate.
No.
If you don't have enough materials.
Just an invitation.
Yeah. We can use nature as inspiration and materials. Nature is the ultimate resource, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It doesn't have to be the material that we use necessarily. Like the imagery always comes up just going back to that same image. I've got flowers, I've got butterflies, I've got more flowers and seascapes and leaves and all sorts of natural symbolism. And this other felted piece that I did, the trees, the sun, the moon, and the water and fire and all of these natural elements that come through in our art making that help to ground us. Or at least, that's what we're looking for. That's what they do for me sometimes.
So I guess We are getting close to that time where we're going to invite everyone to take another 5 minutes. Well, specifically us, because we're going to close up.
Yes.
But yeah, just a 5-minute reminder for us, I think.
Yep.
You can continue working as long as you want.
Yes. Yeah. Feel free to check in with us at the time, but your time is your own. I think I finally figured out how to put the other replays up so that they show up as actual videos on our channel. So you can watch those maybe a little bit more easily if you do want a little more time, a little more company in future.
All right. Oh.
Holy smokes.
I know, right?
It goes by so fast.
It did go by fast. So I'll invite you, Chelsea, and anyone else that is working alongside us just to take a moment just to do that. Check in with your body again. Perhaps you might need a stretch. Could focus anywhere that you were maybe holding tension in while you were making art. So maybe you were holding a marker or many markers. Maybe check in with your shoulders. We can kind of get into leaning over. Just raising our arms up, stretching to both sides maybe. Checking in with our neck. Maybe we haven't looked up in a while. Take a look around the room. And possibly, like myself, I haven't stood up, so I'm going to just stand up.
That's a good idea.
And just do a stretch. Yeah.
And I feel like I also forgot to breathe.
Yeah, that's true.
I was holding my breath That's another thing that we need to pay attention to, especially since we started with that. Maybe remembering to take a deep breath, the one that comes into our bellies, or a couple that come into our bellies.
Yeah.
And move out with a sigh. That just feels really good.
Yeah, so now we have a chance to kind of look at our art. And as we mentioned before, we don't have to gain meaning from our art each and every time or at all. Sometimes it just feels good to make art for no other reason than just feels good to make it, and that's okay. Yeah. Do you feel like you want to say anything about your art, Chelsea, today?
Sure, I'd love to. I really enjoyed this process. I haven't felt it in a while, so it was nice to do it again. And I really just, I mentioned this earlier, but that sound is just so satisfying to me. So I really feel like that was comforting to me, which is what art as a resource is about in a lot of cases. And I did mention also that I was feeling inspired by Yayoi Kusama and specifically her soft sculptures, where she uses polka dots on these textiles and creates soft sculptures with them. And so I was, yeah, just kind of taking that inspiration into my two-dimensional felting. And I started with just the yellow, and then I feel like once we checked in and I was kind of thinking about, what I was doing and whether I was enjoying it, whether it was what I needed, I kind of felt inclined to add more color to it. But instead of switching colors completely, I started mixing the colors. And then it started kind of switching from yellow to blue and purple and yellow. And then now it's just moving into blue and purple, and it might just be a rainbow across the piece. I'm not really sure how it's going to end up, but I do want to continue working on it. So yeah, it's really nice. And I love that feeling. I feel like you can hear it.
Yes, I definitely would love to also it as well, but one of the the drawbacks of not making art in the same space. But you have definitely inspired. I have felting materials at home that I haven't cracked open.
Oh, so satisfying.
Yeah, I think it might be time.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing your art.
thanks. Love to hear about yours.
Yeah, so it's funny because I think I might be in the process of making a rainbow too. I think I wanted to wait until these darker colors dried, and then I was going to add in some yellows and oranges, um, which would basically wind up in some rainbow colors. I don't know. I love the way I went over top of the bowls that I drew under the hearts with just a white wax crayon.
Mm.
And so I know it's hard to see, and my video is a little choppy, so I won't try and hold it up. But when you use a white crayon with watercolor, it makes it so the watercolor can't go on top of the wax crayon, and I love that effect. It's one of my go-tos. Um, yeah, I really like it. I think another part of that, like, I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, and I kind of like that. And I think that's a pretty good resource to have in life, of not knowing how things are going to work out. Because that rings true a lot in life, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I have some thoughts about like what it might be. I'm thinking it's not finished. I might go back into it, but in the center here, it looks kind of like a spoon. And there's that first heart that I drew. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit more meaning there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Thanks for sharing, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So few things we can actually predict in this life. Eh? Art is a reflection of our lives in so many ways.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, do we have any things that we have to say before we sign off?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And for watching the replay, and everyone who is participating in this, however they are participating in it. We so appreciate you, and thanks for showing up for yourself too, because this is an act of I don't want to say self-care because it's such a it's such a widely used term, but I really do think it is a way to care for yourself, and art is a resource. That's what we're talking about today. So it is taking care of yourself to make this time to be here and be present with yourself and be present with us, and express yourself creatively. So yeah, really just want to express gratitude for that. As Sarah mentioned, next time we join together again will be April 25th. And if you would like to bring some natural materials with you, we will be talking about using natural materials and just nature as a resource in art making. That's going to be more of our topic for next time. So take some time to do that if you choose to, if you like to, if you're interested in that. And don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to us if you haven't. That helps us a lot, and it makes a big difference. And we just get really excited every time we get a like and a subscription. So yeah, it's really helpful. So thank you for that. And if you want to share your art, do it on our art community, our community gallery on the website. The link for that is below. Just keeping in mind, it is a public space in many ways. It's members only, but anyone can be a member. So as long as you've signed up for the web page, to be a member, you can see it. So do bear that in mind. But we would love to see your art, and because we don't get to see your face or what you're doing in this particular context. So it would be nice to connect in that way if you feel up for it. We always welcome your feedback. If there's something you want to see us doing in future live hives, we'd love to hear about that in the comments below. Or DM us on Instagram. I think we determined last time we joined together that was the term that we're using, is DMing on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you there too if you follow us. I think that's everything, Sarah. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. No. It's been fun. And I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah. 2 weeks time. Thanks again for coming, everyone. We'll see y'all soon. Bye.
Bye.